Can you imagine a drink being hated simply for representing the wrong people? Today, it's everywhere. At parties, bars, stadiums, barbecues. But in ancient Rome, drinking beer could almost be seen as a cultural betrayal. Yes, the Romans hated beer, not because it tasted bad, nor due to lack of access, but for something much deeper. Something that involves power, identity, prejudice, and a silent rivalry between two beverages that shaped the history of humanity. But why so much disdain? What was it about beer that provoked such aversion in such an advanced civilization? You're about to discover a little-known story, surprising revelations that might change your view of ancient Rome and even of the beer you drink today. One of the first signs of this contempt appears in the writings of Pliny the Elder, one of the most respected scholars of ancient Rome. In his monumental work Natural History, he recorded everything: minerals, plants, exotic animals, medical practices, legends. But when it came to beer, Pliny's tone shifted. He mentioned it briefly, almost with disdain. He didn't call it beer, but used a term laced with irony: barley wine. Stop and think about that. Calling beer barley wine wasn't a compliment. It was a subtle provocation, a refined way to belittle the drink, to compare it with something that, in Roman eyes, was superior in every way. To Pliny and many Roman elites, beer wasn't worthy of attention. It was a foreign eccentricity, a habit of uncultured peoples, an inferior substance that didn't deserve space among the empire's great achievements. Prejudice against beer was shared by historians, politicians, and writers. It was part of a collective mindset, and perhaps no one made that clearer than Tacitus, the great chronicler of Roman morals and customs. In his work Germania, when describing the Germanic peoples beyond the empire's borders, Tacitus did something revealing. He cited beer as part of these foreigners' lifestyle, but he didn't describe it with gastronomic curiosity, much less admiration. On the contrary, the drink was treated as just another one of the many rustic peculiarities of peoples considered barbaric. The association was clear. Where wine was lacking, barbarism abounded. Fermented barley, dense, bitter, served in rough mugs in the cold northern forests, embodied everything the Romans feared and despised: disorder, primitivism, a silent threat to the idea of civilization. To the Romans, these peoples, Germanic, Celtic, Thracian, were seen as savage, untamable, crude. And beer, with its strong flavor, thick foam, and unrefined methods of preparation and consumption, fit that stereotype perfectly. While wine required vineyards, care, storage and amphory, tasting rituals, and refined social gatherings, beer could be made with minimal resources in rustic barrels, consumed in dark taverns or around tribal campfires. And if even Roman scholars were already mocking beer, imagine what happened when the emperor himself decided to join in the provocation. We're talking about Julian the Apostate, one of the most enigmatic and controversial figures of the Roman Empire. A philosopher, soldier, poet, and the last emperor to attempt restoring the pagan gods in the Christian era, Julian was anything but ordinary. His intellect was sharp, his writing full of subtle irony, and his opinion on beer absolutely venomous. In one of his epigrams, he recorded a biting phrase that revealed more about the Roman elite mindset than any formal treatise: "The smell of Celtic beer reminds me of a drunk peasant's vomit." Meanwhile, wine remained untouchable. It was the nectar of noble halls, the companion of philosophers, the fuel of banquets where the fate of the empire was decided. It was served in ornate goblets, at political gatherings, during religious celebrations. Wine was status, wine was rhetoric, wine was Rome. Behind Julian's sarcasm, behind the elite's mockery, there was an almost invisible fear. The fear that Roman culture was being slowly threatened by barrels and mugs. And that fear wasn't unfounded. On the empire's frontiers, far from the marble columns and parchment libraries, beer had ceased to be just a barbarian thing. In practice, it was what sustained many of Rome's own soldiers. In more remote regions like Britannia, where the cold was constant and grapes simply wouldn't grow, legionaries had no choice. Without access to traditional wine, they turned to whatever was available, and that meant locally fermented barley. There, beer wasn't a symbol of inferiority, it was survival. The Vindolanda tablets, An extraordinary set of handwritten records found near Hadrian's Wall revealed something the official history tried to ignore. Roman soldiers requesting beer, formally, in writing, amid logistical messages and communications between officers. Words like servitia appear, a clear and direct request for beer at the garrisons. It was as if, far from Rome's symbolic oversight, the Romans themselves allowed a break from the cultural code. Yes, they did drink it, but in silence, without pride. It was merely a practical, temporary solution, a tolerated gesture, but never a celebrated one. Even there, where beer nourished and warmed the bodies of the men guarding the empire's borders, it was not legitimized. And yet, there were those who tried to break that silence. Around 83 AD, in a move as bold as it was unlikely, a Roman general decided to bring beer within the walls of Rome, literally. His name was Gnaeus Julius Agricola, an experienced commander, governor of Britannia, deeply familiar with the realities of the frontier and the customs of conquered peoples. During his time in the British lands, Agricola didn't just fight local tribes, he observed them. He learned from them. And at some point, he recognized the practical value of the drink his own soldiers consumed on the empire's edges. When he returned to Rome, he brought brewers with him. And what he did next was even more unexpected. He opened a brewery in the capital. Yes, in the very heart of the empire, where wine flowed as a symbol of power. Someone tried to give beer a legitimate space. It was an unprecedented initiative, almost subversive. But despite the boldness, Agricola's brewery didn't thrive. It wasn't shut down by decree, nor destroyed by protesters. It was simply ignored. With no loyal clientele, no interest from the elite, and no significant popular support, the business gradually faded away. And thus, the only recorded attempt to introduce beer into Roman daily life vanished from history, drowned out by the pride of a civilization unwilling to give in. Rome remained faithful to its wine, in silver goblets, in public festivals, in religious rites, in poets' verses, and in the political decisions that shaped the fate of the ancient world. Beer, on the other hand, remained in the shadows. It persisted among soldiers on duty, among conquered peoples, among those who lived outside the walls. It survived where Rome refused to look. So next time you crack open a cold one, remember this: you're toasting with the drink Rome hated. Now I want to hear your opinion. Did you already know about the Romans' hatred for beer? Do you think Roman prejudice against beer was pure pride or fear of what came from outside? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more epic content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. In the video on the screen, we'll reveal the secrets behind people's names in ancient Rome.